In order to gain the idea of how significant the super outbreak of 1974 was, we need to look at the elements that came together which resulted in this massively destructive weather event. A powerful springtime low-pressure system developed across the northern plains on April 1st. While moving into the Mississippi and Ohio River Valley areas, a surge of very moist air intensified the storm further, while there was a sharp temperature contrast between both sides of the storm system. Forecasters were already expecting a severe weather outbreak to occur on April the 3rd, but not to the extent in which ultimately occurred. Several F2 and F3 tornadoes had struck portions of the Ohio River Valley and the Deep South in a separate earlier outbreak on April 1st and 2nd, and this earlier storm system included 3 killer tornadoes in the states of Kentucky, Alabama, and Tennessee. Between the two outbreaks, an additional tornado was reported in Indiana in the early morning hours of April 3rd, several hours before the official start of the super outbreak. By the early afternoon on Wednesday, April 3rd, numerous supercells and clusters of thunderstorms developed, and the outbreak began quickly, with storms developing across central Illinois and a secondary zone developing near the Appalachian region of East Tennessee, central Alabama, and northern Georgia. The worst of the outbreak shifted towards the Ohio Valley between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, where it produced 4 of the 7 F5 tornadoes over a span of just 2 hours, when 3 powerful supercells traveled across the area, one in central and southern Ohio, a second one across southern Indiana and Ohio, and a third one across northern Kentucky. Later during the evening hours, activity again began to escalate farther to the Deep South, with several violent tornadoes crossing the northern third of Alabama. Activity also spread to central Tennessee and east Kentucky, with numerous tornadoes being reported, most of which were concentrated in the Cumberland region. Despite early reports, 31 people were killed in the storm, including 18 at the single block of Green Street in Brandenburg. The vast majority of homes in the tornado's path were leveled, with many reduced to clean slabs and empty basements. One obliterated home sustained total collapse of its concrete walkout basement wall. Cars and trucks were also thrown and mangled beyond recognition, some of which had nothing left but just the frame and tires. Those mangled vehicles were taken to the Meade County Fairgrounds during the recovery process to allow their owners to meet with the insurance adjusters to assess the damage. Some cars were reported to have shingle roofing nailed to the windshield from inside of the car. A couple of sacred and cornerstone addresses of Brandenburg were not immune to the damage of April 3, 1974. Several tombstones of the Camp Anderson Cemetery were toppled and broken, and some were displaced a small distance. The cemetery was one of the first sites to be damaged as the tornado moved into the main business district of Brandenburg. Just seconds later, along Lawrence Street, the Phillips Memorial Baptist Church was in the direct path of the tornado and was destroyed as it passed. The church was built in the late 1800s and had stood as one of the cornerstones of refuge in the community all those years. Most of the trees were debarked or snapped off at the base and thrown, and grass was scoured from the ground in some areas as well. Many survivors will say that the area of town looked as if it had been plowed. The same storm would later produce tornadoes in the Louisville metropolitan area just a short time later. Just minutes after the storm passed, people began the recovery process of searching for friends and loved ones that were trapped in and under the debris of what was once buildings and structures. The main business district was without power, which was a blessing because the utility lines that were intact were entangled among the debris and scattered among the street tossed by the storm. Rescuers used anything that they could find in order to place the injured on to take them to medical attention. Workers used doors to lay patients on and carried them up the hill to the clinic, which was located on Main Street, halfway up the hill just a few yards from the tornado's path that was basically unharmed from the storm. The clinic became an emergency triage center and a temporary morgue. A short time later, the casualties of the day were moved to the nearby school gym, where the gruesome task of identifying bodies and notifying the next of kin began. Ramsey Field was used as a landing zone for Army and National Guard helicopters to receive and transport the critically injured to area and regional hospitals. Most of the ambulances that were in town were damaged during the storm because it was housed at the local funeral homes. Individuals used panel trucks and vans to haul the injured to nearby hospitals. Due to the size of the disaster, a community funeral service was held the following Sunday afternoon at the Meade County High School gymnasium to allow the community to grieve the loss of those killed. Recovery operations were set up at the school until other arrangements could be made and set up. The storm destroyed the county courthouse, which housed all of the county government offices and emergency services dispatch. Fort Knox provided soldiers to help protect the city and seal off the destructed area as night fell on April 3rd of 1974. By morning, members of the Kentucky National Guard arrived to help with the cleanup and recovery efforts. The tornado's form was unusual to the Ohio River Valley because it was a broad wedge-shaped wall cloud that descended from the base of the thunderstorm structure to the ground filled with debris and water vapor. Most tornadoes are noted as a skinnier funnel-like form or even rope-shaped, which leaves a much smaller width of destruction. Several reports of funnel clouds were reported just to the west of Brandenburg as the storm took aim at the city. Even though there is no specific picture of the wedge-shaped tornado, it is believed later through research and investigation through those reports that they were multiple vortexes or smaller tornadoes that was rotating around the main wedge-shaped funnel. A 2004 survey for risk management solutions citing an earlier Dr. Ted Fujita study found that 3/4 of all tornadoes in the 1974 super outbreak were produced by 30 families of tornadoes or multiple tornadoes spawned in succession by a single thunderstorm cell. It's important to note that most of these tornadoes were not associated with squall lines. These were long-lived and long-track supercell tornadic storms. This storm provided little or no advance warning, and residents' account of that day include the common comment that the day felt strange or uneasy early during the morning hours, and just before the supercell struck, a silence and a greenish tint was seen in the sky. Local folklore around Brandenburg had said that the river would protect the community from such storms, but unfortunately that theory failed the test of fate on the afternoon around 4 o'clock on April 3rd, 1974.